Now remember, I told y'all I think that Diddy's twins are victims of SRA. Go check out the old video if you don't know what that means. Please Google it. It's a type of mind experiment that people do when they're involved with certain secret groups. They do that to people to control them mentally.
Nobody had 50 Cent break silence on their bingo card, and yet here we are. Because when 50 finally opened his mouth about Diddy's so-called twin crime, the internet didn't just lean in. It froze, not because of what was proven, but because of what was implied. And trust me, implication is way more dangerous than accusation. This wasn't a rant. This wasn't a meme. This wasn't even a joke, and that's what made it terrifying. 50 didn't yell. He didn't laugh. He didn't clown the situation like usual. He dropped a line that landed like a quiet threat and let the internet do the screaming for him. Words like planned, intentional, and people knew started circulating. And suddenly timelines felt less like social media and more like evidence boards. Now let's be clear. Nothing was confirmed. No charges. No verdicts. Just vibes so dark they made Hollywood scandals look like daycare drama. People started whispering about rituals, symbolism, patterns, not facts but questions. The kind of questions that don't trend unless they hit a nerve. And once 50 Cent enters the chat with that tone, history tells us one thing. Somebody's narrative is about to collapse. For years, the tension between 50 Cent and Diddy has lived just under the surface. Simmering like a pot, everyone pretended wasn't on the stove. Shots were fired through jokes, captions, and sarcasm, so sharp it felt surgical. But this time, the tone shifted. When 50 finally spoke on what the internet has labeled Diddy's twin crime, it didn't come wrapped in humor or Instagram clownery. It came quiet, measured, and that's exactly why it landed like a THUNDRCLAP. Because when someone known for trolling suddenly stops joking, people listen differently. 50 didn't present evidence. He didn't name sources. He didn't even tell a full story. He hinted, he suggested. He framed it as something people should look at closer. And in internet culture, suggestion is gasoline. Especially when it comes from someone with a long memory and nothing to lose, the background matters here. These two have history stretching back decades, built on industry rivalry, power struggles, and mutual distrust. Every era had its Cold Wars, its subliminal shots, its "I'll let the internet connect the dots" moments. Fans were used to the back and forth. They expected jokes. What they didn't expect was a tone that sounded like warning instead of entertainment. The phrase that set everything off wasn't dramatic on its own. It was the implication that shook people. Words like premeditated don't float casually. They carry weight. They suggest forethought, coordination, intent. 50 didn't say crime in a legal sense. He said it in the way conspiracy conversations do, as a pattern, a setup. A moment people allegedly ignored until it was too late, and once that seed was planted, the internet did what it always does. It dug. Old interviews resurfaced. Lyrics got reanalyzed. Clips were slowed down, zoomed in, replayed like hidden messages were waiting to be decoded. Suddenly, everything felt connected. Not proven, but connected enough to feel unsettling. The twin crime label itself exploded because of its vagueness. Nobody could agree on what it meant, and that ambiguity made it viral. Some interpreted it as parallel incidents. Others saw it as symbolic language. A few took it too far, running wild with theories that blurred the line between speculation and fiction. And yet the conversation kept growing, because unanswered questions are addictive. First reactions were split clean down the middle. One side accused 50 of stirring chaos for attention, calling it another calculated move in a long-standing feud. The other side treated his words like a coded message, convinced he was saying more than he was allowed to say. Both sides fed the algorithm, and the algorithm rewarded the confusion. Sarcasm flooded timelines as a defense mechanism. People joked that this storyline made Hollywood thrillers look lazy. Others said if Netflix tried to adapt this, it would get sued before episode 2. Humor masked the discomfort, because beneath the jokes was a realization nobody wanted to say out loud when powerful people hint at dark patterns. Even without proof, it changes perception permanently. What made the moment feel heavier was 50's restraint. No follow-up, no clarification, no walk back. He didn't correct interpretations or fuel them directly. He let the internet spiral on its own. That silence felt intentional, almost strategic. Like he knew exactly how much to say to start a fire without standing too close to the flames. Diddy's camp, at least publicly, didn't rush to respond. No emergency statement. No denial tour. Just quiet. And in scandals like this, silence doesn't calm anything. It amplifies speculation. Fans argued over whether ignoring it was smart or dangerous. Every hour without a response added weight to the rumor mill. Even though nothing concrete had been presented, media outlets tread carefully. Headlines leaned on words like claims, suggests, and alleges. Nobody wanted to cross legal lines, but nobody wanted to miss the traffic either. The coverage stayed vague, echoing the same uncertainty 50 introduced. It was a feedback loop of implication feeding implication. What really escalated tension was how familiar this felt. The entertainment industry has a long history of whispers ignored until they explode years later. That memory haunted the conversation. People weren't reacting just to what 50 said. They were reacting to what they'd seen happen before. When warnings were dismissed as jokes stopped by the end of that first wave, the damage was already done. Not to reputations in a legal sense, but to perception. Once the idea of premeditation enters a narrative, even hypothetically, it never fully leaves. It lingers. It stains. It forces every future headline to be read with suspicion, and that's where the real controversy lived. Not in facts, but in framing. 50 Cent didn't accuse. He reframed. He took something people thought they understood and suggested it might have been orchestrated. Whether true or not, that suggestion cracked the story wide open. As the internet settled into its next phase of obsession, one thing was clear. This wasn't a throwaway comment. It was a spark. And sparks don't need proof to spread. They just need oxygen. Once the spark caught, the internet didn't just speculate. It sprinted. The conversation mutated from, "Did he really say that?" to, "Why would he say that now?" Faster than anyone could slow it down. Group chats went into overtime. Podcasts rearranged their schedules. Comment sections turned into think tanks with absolutely no credentials but unlimited confidence. This wasn't analysis anymore. It was collective obsession with a mystery nobody could fully define. Memes did what memes always do. They softened the fear by wrapping it in jokes sharp enough to cut. Screenshots of old interviews got slapped next to dramatic captions like "Y'all missed this." Even when nothing in the clip proved anything. People joked that the internet had turned into a low-budget crime documentary overnight. Others said this storyline had more twists than a prestige drama and less clarity than a foggy windshield. Celebrity reactions were the quiet kind, which made them louder. A well-timed like here. A vague quote there. Posts about truth, patterns, and things coming to light appeared with suspicious timing. Nobody named names, but everyone knew which conversation they were orbiting. The subtweet economy was booming, and every cryptic post felt like a breadcrumb people were desperate to follow. The outrage didn't explode. It simmered. Fans argued over intent. Some insisted 50 was just doing what he always does, provoking, poking, stirring the pot for sport. Others swore this felt different, heavier, less playful. The phrase, "this isn't trolling," kept popping up, which is internet code for "this makes me uncomfortable, but I don't know why." Pop culture comparisons went nuclear. People said this made celebrity feuds look like playground arguments. Others joked that if this were a movie, critics would call it unrealistic for being too dark. The exaggeration wasn't subtle, but it captured the mood perfectly. Because when speculation gets this intense, reality starts to feel scripted and fiction starts feeling plausible. The phrase "twin crime" became a meme and a mystery at the same time. Everyone tried to define it. Parallel incidents. Mirrored outcomes. Symbolic language. Nobody agreed, and that disagreement fueled engagement. Ambiguity became the engine. The less clear it was, the more people talked. Confusion isn't a bug on the internet. It's a feature. Public outrage began turning inward. Fans questioned why they were so quick to dismiss industry whispers in the past. Why jokes always come first and accountability comes later. The conversation drifted from the individuals involved to the ecosystem that lets rumors grow unchecked. People weren't just reacting to 50's words. They were reacting to the history behind them. Media coverage escalated without clarifying anything. Headlines leaned hard on caution, stacking qualifiers like alleged, suggested, and claimed until the articles read like disclaimers. Nobody crossed legal lines, but nobody shut the conversation down either. The ambiguity kept traffic high and nerves frayed. What made this phase especially volatile was 50's continued silence. No follow-up jokes. No clarification. No walk back. He let the internet argue with itself. That absence felt deliberate, like dropping a puzzle on the table and leaving the room. Every theory grew legs because there was nothing new to contradict it. Diddy's continued quiet became its own headline. Supporters framed it as dignity. Critics framed it as avoidance. Neutral observers didn't know what to think, and uncertainty became contagious. Silence doesn't equal guilt, but it also doesn't stop speculation. In the court of public opinion, quiet often sounds like strategy. Whether it is or not, the memes evolved again, sharper now. Less laughter, more commentary. Jokes started carrying judgment. Humor turned into critique. The internet wasn't just entertained, it was evaluating. And once audiences switch from laughing to judging, reputations start feeling the heat even without proof. By the end of this escalation, the mood had changed completely. What started as a cryptic comment had grown into a cloud of suspicion thick enough to block out nuance. Nobody had answers. Nobody had evidence. But everyone had opinions. And in digital culture, opinion spreads faster than fact every single time. This wasn't a moment that burned bright and faded.
It was a slow, unsettling rise.
The kind that doesn't scream but hums in the background, reminding everyone that once a narrative is cracked open, it rarely closes cleanly. And the internet, fully aware of that truth, leaned in closer, waiting for the aftermath it knew was coming. After the speculation peaked and the timelines finally caught their breath, the fallout settled into something far more dangerous than outrage: permanence. This was no longer about a single comment or a viral moment. It was about how a narrative, once cracked open, refuses to close. 50 Cent didn't need to say another word. The damage, such as it was, had already taken shape in the public imagination. And imagination is where reputations quietly change forever. The industry response shifted first, subtle but telling. Invitations felt more calculated. Appearances became carefully curated. People who once joked freely around the situation suddenly chose their words like contracts were listening. When speculation gets this dark, proximity becomes a risk assessment. Nobody wants to be quoted in the wrong screenshot at the wrong time. And everyone suddenly remembered how permanent the internet can be, for 50. The moment cemented a familiar role, the disruptor who never brings receipts but always brings questions. Some saw it as irresponsible. Others saw it as a warning disguised as commentary. Either way, it reinforced his reputation as someone who understands how narratives work better than most. He didn't accuse. He suggested. He didn't explain. He let silence do the heavy lifting. And that restraint made the moment feel intentional. Not impulsive, Diddy's public image, meanwhile, entered a new phase of scrutiny. Not condemnation, not cancellation, suspicion. And suspicion is sticky. It doesn't need proof to linger. Every future headline, every appearance, every absence would now be filtered through a lens that didn't exist before. That's the cost of implication in a culture trained to read between lines that may or may not be there. The phrase premeditated became less about a claim and more about a feeling. A tone, a mood. People weren't debating facts. They were debating vibes. And vibes, once poisoned, are hard to cleanse. The conversation stopped asking, "Did this happen?" and started asking, "What if it did?" That shift is subtle, but it's where perception quietly changes direction. What followed was a broader reckoning with how quickly audiences elevate speculation to significance. Fans who once laughed at conspiracies found themselves entertaining them. Critics who demanded proof still clicked, still watched, still discussed. The attention economy doesn't care whether belief is sincere or skeptical. Engagement is engagement. And this story had plenty of it. The most lasting consequence wasn't legal or official. It was cultural. The moment exposed how easily powerful figures can destabilize narratives without making direct claims. A sentence here. A pause there. The internet fills the rest. That realization unsettled people because it meant no story is ever fully controlled once it enters public space. As time passed, the outrage cooled, but the questions remained. Not sharpened, not answered, just present. They lingered in side conversations, resurfaced in unrelated debates, popped up whenever either name trended for any reason. The story became background noise, a low hum of doubt that never fully disappeared, and that's the real aftermath. Not explosions, not apologies, but a permanent shift in how stories are consumed. Audiences became more suspicious, more alert, more willing to believe there's always something beneath the surface. Whether that's healthy skepticism or dangerous paranoia, depends on who you ask. What made this saga uniquely unsettling was its lack of resolution. No confirmation, no denial strong enough to silence debate. No dramatic climax to end the season. Just an open loop. And open loops drive engagement far longer than closed stories ever could. The entertainment world moved on, as it always does, but not without carrying the weight of what was implied. Because once the idea of orchestration enters a narrative, even hypothetically, it reframes everything that came before and everything that follows. The past gets re-examined. The future gets questioned. Trust thins, and perhaps that was the most shocking part of all. Not the claim, not the speculation, but how little it took to destabilize certainty. One comment, one word, one pause. In an industry built on perception, that's all it ever takes. So the story didn't end with answers. It ended with unease. And unease is the kind of ending that never really ends. It just waits. And this is why stories like this never come with neat conclusions or comforting bows. Because when powerful people speak in half sentences and let silence do the talking, the mess doesn't explode, it lingers. One word, one pause, one carefully chosen implication, and suddenly an entire narrative feels unstable. That's not an accident. That's how the internet works when suggestion does more damage than certainty ever could. Let's be real. This wasn't about proof. It was about perception. And perception is the real currency here. Once doubt enters the chat, it doesn't leave quietly. It camps out. It waits. It pops back up every time a name trends or a headline drops. And if you think this conversation is done, you haven't been paying attention to how scandals actually move. So now it's your turn. Smash that like button like it owes you money and keeps dodging your calls. Hit subscribe like you're securing early access to whatever drops next, because you already know something always drops next. And don't just watch quietly, jump in the comments. Was this a calculated warning, a reckless hint, or just another example of the internet turning smoke into wildfire? Say it with your chest. Turn on notifications, because controversy doesn't wait for upload schedules or fact checkers. It hits randomly, trends instantly, and disappears just long enough to come back louder. If you blink, you miss it. If you stay ready, you catch everything. Remember, the loud scandals burn fast, but the quiet ones last forever.